Merely level 5. All the spirit masters in the central continent had at least one chance to form a contract with a magical beast. A rank 1. Magical beasts' combat strength was more than 10 times stronger than a spirit master of the same rank. However, magical beasts had always looked down on humans and were unwilling to become human-contracted beasts. Thus, a new profession called a beast tamer was born. Not only was the Night Mansion rewarding the helper with a magical beast, but they were also responsible for helping to tame the beast. A magical beast contract. This condition was placed in front of the various large factions and families of the Raya Empire. It was no different from placing a naked beauty in front of a strong man who had been abstinent for a long time. Even Beiting Huang was tempted, but she was not a spiritual master. She was not qualified to form a contract with a magical beast. I still have something on. I'll take my leave first. The family was currently selecting candidates for the egg hunt. Beiting Huang was a good-for-nothing and a thorn in Beiting Han's side. There was no way she would be chosen. She was just wasting her time here. Beiting Yao was stunned for a moment before he realized that Beiting Huang could not gather spiritual qi. He regretted asking Beiting Huang to join in the fun. Where are you going? Shall I go with you? Where was she going? She was a mercenary in her previous life, and the mercenary world was a world she was familiar with. It was better for her to return to being a mercenary. On one hand, she could increase her strength, and on the other hand, she could earn some money so that she could go to the capital to find her brother. I want to go to the Mercenary Association AER. Beiting Huang, you're a piece of trash. Who sent you here? On the high stage, Beiting Han, who was standing next to Beiting, shouted at Beiting Huang and called her a good-for-nothing in front of everyone. Let's go! Seeing that the situation was not looking good, Beiting Yao pulled Beiting Huang and was about to leave. It's too late. Beiting Huang gently pulled her arm away, and her wrist slipped out of his grasp. He didn't know what technique she used, but he felt that her wrist was as slippery as a fish, and he couldn't grab it immediately. Little Ninth, don't argue with him. You can't beat him. He's a level 5 spiritual practitioner. You are. He's just a mere level 5 cultivator. It's not a problem for me. Beiting Huang narrowed her eyes. Her aura suddenly changed, and she was like an unsheathed sword. She was so sharp that Beiting Yao, who was standing very close to her, had to step back and look at her in horror. When did she become so powerful? Was she still Beiting Huang? Was she still a piece of trash? She was stunned for a moment. The person in front of her was still Beiting Huang. Seeing her walking up the stage step by step, Beiting Yao thought that she had been beaten silly. He quickly went forward and hugged Beiting Huang's waist. Let's go, Little Ninth. Let's go to the Mercenary Association. Don't argue with them. Who said that? Beiting Huang sneered. She grabbed both of Beiting Yao's wrists and exerted a little force. Beiting Yao felt his wrists go numb, and his hands loosened involuntarily. The crowd parted to make way for her. Everyone looked at Beiting Han on the stage, and then at Beiting Huang below the stage. Beiting Huang was full of vigor. Trash? Who are you calling trash? She pointed at Beiting Han's slender fingers like a sword. Get here and let me show you what real trash is. You! Beiting Han was the eldest son of the branch family head. The only one who was qualified to stand next to him was his younger brother. Beiting Huang, what right does a piece of trash like you have to challenge my brother? I, Beiting Hao, challenge you. This person could be considered the #1 expert beside Beiting Han. He was a level 4 spiritual practitioner. Beiting Huang sneered. What a waste. You, a level 4 spiritual practitioner, want to challenge a piece of trash like me? Why wouldn't I dare? Beiting Huang narrowed her eyes slightly at the young man who was 2 or 3 years older than her. He had bullied her many times and wanted her life several times. In order to humiliate her, he had almost raped Mu Qingling. If she did not teach him a lesson, she would not be Beiting Huang. Brother Hao, it's her. She fed me poison. A voice came from the periphery of the crowd. Everyone looked in that direction. A woman in a light green gauze dress walked over slowly. Her big watery eyes blinked at Beiting Hao. No matter how mesmerized Beiting Hao was by her, all the young men on the field were stunned when they saw her. This woman was none other than Beiting Huang's sister-in-law, Mu Qingling's younger sister, Mu Wanyue. She had been looking for His Highness the Night King in the entire city since early in the morning. Seeing that there was a commotion here, she came over. Who would have thought that she would be so lucky to see the trash be bullied by her brothers and her family? She pointed at Beiting Huang with her fair hand, and a few tears fell from her eyes. This was the good thing about women. Once they showed weakness and threw a tantrum, they could charm men and make them unable to distinguish right from wrong. Someone immediately said, "Ninth young master, why are you so vicious? Yeah, you fed such a beautiful woman poison. What a bunch of stupid people." Beiting Huang's cold eyes swept around like a bolt of lightning. All the voices in the square were silenced by her gaze. "Is that so? Are you saying that I should stand still and let you kill me and my fiancé last night? Or should I kneel at your feet and beg you to kill us? How funny. You're not as good as me when you fight me. Why are you acting coquettish here?" She had poisoned second Miss Mu to protect her fiancé. Ninth young master was really loyal. He was actually willing to poison such a beautiful woman for his fiancé. What if they liked the ninth young master's protective personality? Beiting Huang was dressed in an exquisite robe. The wind blew and outlined her thin figure. She was tall and straight like a bamboo. Her daring temperament and righteous character instantly charmed all the girls present. As soon as she finished speaking, a woman exclaimed, "Ah, ninth young master is so handsome. I want to be her fiancé too." "Yeah, I'm so envious of Miss Mu." "Me too. What should I do? What should I do? Ninth young master, I like you so much." Beiting Huang was as calm as water. She smiled at the girls in the crowd and nodded slightly, causing the crowd to exclaim, "Cut the crap, Beiting Huang. I want to challenge you." Firstly, Beiting Hao was not used to seeing Beiting Huang. Secondly, he was provoked by the beauty. He couldn't help but jump out and point his sword at Beiting Huang. "Do you dare to accept the challenge? You're just a level 5 spiritual practitioner, yet you want to challenge a piece of trash like me. If you think it's fair, why wouldn't I dare?" With empty hands, Beiting Huang glanced at the longsword in Beiting Hao's hand coldly. A level 5 spiritual practitioner could easily crush a piece of trash, yet he still dared to challenge her with a sword. If the previous owner had not opened the space in the bracelet, he would definitely be unarmed. However, even though the other party had a longsword in his hand, Beiting Huang didn't intend to use a weapon. She sneered and pointed at Beiting Huang with the longsword in her hand. "Die, trash!" "Slice him." The level 5 spiritual practitioner infused the longsword in his hand with spiritual qi, and the sharp blade pierced towards Beiting Huang with a dazzling white light. Beiting Huang stood still, causing the girls who were mesmerized by her elegance to cover their mouths, not daring to look. The tip of the sword struck at Beiting Huang's chest with a sharp aura. On the high platform, the people in charge of the branch of the Beiting family smiled slightly. This piece of trash had better die here today. Although it was just a challenge, swords had no eyes. This piece of trash was so stupid that she didn't even have the ability to protect herself. Since it was a challenge, she had the right to not let Beiting Hao bring a sword to fight and the right not to accept the challenge. However, she acted as if she didn't know anything. It seemed that this trash could only live until the next moment. Beiting Huang made a strange step on the ground. The blade, which was enhanced by the spiritual qi, could only reach her chest. The next second, she grabbed Beiting Hao's wrist with lightning speed. The tip of the sword was forced to face down and swept away in front of him. "Ah!" A shrill scream resounded in the sky. The white jade street in front of Beiting Hao was covered with blood. At this moment, almost everyone on the scene had their eyes closed. No one saw what Beiting Huang had done, but Beiting Hao's D*C key was cut off by his own sword. Was a man still a man without his most precious part? There was no man present who was not terrified. He subconsciously clamped his legs tighter. There were even those who were timid and could not help but reach out to cover the thing between their legs. How could the 9th young master be so valiant? Beiting Huang, you... Beiting Han jumped out of the ring. His brother originally had a 5-star magical beast. If it weren't for the fact that she was trash, why would he not summon it? When did this piece of trash become so powerful? Without a word, he sliced his brother with one move. Beiting Hao's face was pale. Beads of sweat fell from his forehead. He covered the front of his body with his hands. His white robe was dyed red. The redness was getting bigger and bigger. He fell to the ground and rolled around in pain. "I'm sorry. I accidentally slipped." Beiting Huang smiled faintly. She picked up the sword on the ground with her toes and tossed it. "I didn't expect this sword to be so sharp. I don't have such a good thing." The meaning was obvious. This sword wasn't hers. She had nothing to do with Beiting Hao's death. In addition, she had used the words she had said to Mu Qingling previously. If others wanted to kill her, did she have to stand still and let others beat and kill her? To not admit that one has received a benefit, how could he be so shameless? Beiting Han was so angry that he couldn't speak. His hand that was pointing at Beiting Huang trembled again and again. You! Beiting Day watched helplessly now that his youngest son was no longer a man. He looked at Beiting Huang with eyes that were as terrifying as poison. Beiting Huang raised her head and looked at him. Her sharp, killing intent surged along with her gaze. She had never been an impulsive person. Since she dared to do this today, she had never been afraid of the future. "Ha! It's really lively today." Just as Beiting Day was about to make a move, someone from the back of the crowd broke the silence. An exquisite carriage was pulled by 4 white-winged horned horses. Purple silk ribbons hung from the 4 corners of the carriage, each with a huge night pearl hanging from it. It was high-profile and luxurious, deliberately showing off its nobility. Prince Charming arrives. "It's Lord Xianxia, the Night King's carriage," someone in the crowd shouted. The entire square was in an uproar, as if a drop of water had fallen into a pot of oil. The most excited one was Mu Wanyue, who was standing on the stage. Ever since last night, she had been searching around the city for the Night King's whereabouts. She had searched until this morning. A second ago, she was still wondering where the Night King was resting. She raised her hand and stroked the hairpin on her head. That hairpin was given to her by her cousin in the capital. Her cousin was a beauty and had a very unique taste. She had also seen His Highness on the streets with her cousin 3 years ago. From then on, her life would be impacted by him forever. She knew that many young men in Luobei City liked her useless sister, but she had never been jealous. Mu Qingling, that piece of trash, and Beiting Huang, another piece of trash, had been engaged since they were young. What was the use of liking these people who had no taste? Moreover, she had a male idol in her heart, and that was Xianxia, the 3rd prince of the Raya Empire. Among all the princes, he was the only prince who had been conferred a town. There was no other prince who was favored by the emperor and had the most strength to compete for the position of crown prince. Even if she could not be his main consort and could only be his secondary consort, she was already satisfied. "Your Highness!" Mu Wanyue flew off the stage like a butterfly and rushed towards His Highness's carriage. Your Highness, do you still remember me? I'm from the Nangong family." Boom! There was a flash of white light, and a huge force surged towards them like a tidal wave. Beiting Huang hurriedly took a step to the side. She saw Mu Wanyue's body emerge from the white light and smashed into the ground. "You are not allowed to come within 3 feet of His Highness." It was Xianxia. He had only waved his sleeve and sent Mu Wanyue flying. Mu Wanyue struggled to raise her head from the ground and stared at Xianxia with a vicious gaze. She gritted her teeth. One day, if she were to become His Highness the Night King's woman, she would definitely make this person die a good death. Xianxia did not care what Mu Wanyue was thinking. He smiled and looked at Beiting Huang. "Little brother, we meet again." Beiting Huang had received a bottle of high-quality pills from him, so she didn't know when she would get the chance to thank him. She nodded at Xianxia and mouthed, "Thank you." Then she glanced at Beiting Di and Beiting Han on the stage and prepared to leave. "Stop, you piece of trash! You hurt my brother and you want to leave just like that?" Beiting Han raised his hand and prepared to summon his contracted beast. "Who said the word trash again? Pass down my order. If anyone dares to say this word again, I'll cut off his tongue." A faint voice came from the carriage. A slender hand slowly lifted the curtain, and a stunning face appeared in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, the Night King stood on the palanquin. He took a step forward and slowly landed on the ground. His long robe that trailed the ground and the spider lilies woven with golden threads seemed to come alive under the sunlight. They swayed and were abnormally cold. His godlike face was filled with great dignity. He glanced at Beiting Day and the others on the stage, and they fell to their knees in a panic. "Greetings, Your Highness." In the square, everyone knelt and kowtowed. The only person standing there was one man. Xianxia could not help but shake its head. He looked at Beiting Huang helplessly. This little guy always liked to challenge authority. Beiting Huang still didn't realize it, and casually raised his hand to tug at the hem of his black robe. "Come here, get up!" The last syllable was drawn out and ethereal like a fairy's voice. However, it sounded bone-chilling to the ears. This man was so powerful that it made people kneel down from the depths of their souls. As soon as he finished speaking, no one dared to be the first to stand up. Beiting Han couldn't hold it in any longer, and secretly looked up. He was so shocked that he immediately lost his composure. He pointed at the only person standing on the field and said, "Your Highness, Beiting Huang he dares not to kneel." Xianxia raised his eyebrows indifferently and said with a faint smile, "Why, do you have a problem with that? The next time you see me, you can choose not to kneel." Can you? Of course not. It was not that no one challenged His Highness the Night King's prestige. On this continent, the strong were respected. After becoming powerful enough to become a spirit king, they could be exempted from formalities when they saw the emperor. A spirit king did not have to kneel when he saw the emperor, and he was prepared to do the same when he saw the Night King. However, he was killed by the Night King in one move. Who would complain that their life was too long? Why was it that even a spirit king had to kowtow in front of His Highness the Night King? But a piece of trash like Beiting Huang could have special treatment. Beiting Day had heard that the Night King was eccentric and temperamental. He was afraid that his son would offend the Night King. However, before he could stop him, his usually smart son stood up again. "I wouldn't dare. I don't have the guts to do that. Please punish Beiting Huang for looking down on the royal family." "Hanner," Beiting warned his son. He had already injured one son and did not want to lose another. Beiting Han, on the other hand, was influenced by all kinds of emotions, jealousy, envy, and hatred intertwined. He lost his mind and pointed at Beiting Huang. "Your Highness, please punish Beiting Huang for disrespecting Your Highness." This person was quite persistent. "Ha!" Beiting Huang sneered. In front of so many people in the square, if the Honorable Night King did not punish her, he would be letting down the people kneeling on the ground. These people were full of respect for the Night King. Should the Night King continue to be biased towards her? Or would he choose to protect his dignity and give an explanation to these subjects who respected him? Xianxia's handsome face was so dark that it was about to drip water. A trace of substantial killing intent flashed across his purple pupils. The entire square was so quiet that only the suppressed breathing of everyone could be heard. It was as if time had stopped at this moment. This was the suppression of the strong. Beiting Huang raised his chin slightly and looked at Xianxia. He also looked at her. His eyes were deep and purple. At this moment, because of his anger, they were almost as dark as the stars. He saw the unyielding and stubborn look on this young man's face. He would not kneel even if he died. She clenched her fists tightly and leaned forward slightly. This was a posture that showed she was ready to be unleashed. She clearly knew that her strength was insufficient, but she still had the courage to risk her life. The robe slowly moved behind him. The spider lilies that were spread out in front of him a second ago had already arrived on the high platform in the next second. He sat down unceremoniously on the main seat on the stage and pulled the robe in front of him. The robe seemed to have a mind of its own as it folded into a peak by his feet. "Come here." His voice carried a gentle force as he gently lifted her up. She had no choice but to straighten her back. She looked at Xianxia and saw him reaching out a hand to her. He was giving her an order. His purple eyes were as gentle as an ocean shrouded in sunlight. "Come here." He was getting impatient. He closed his palm slightly, and Beiting Huang's body flew forward involuntarily. She was shocked. If this man wanted to attack her, she would not be able to fight back at all. This feeling was really annoying. She's a guard of the night mansion. Beiting Huang pursed her lips tightly. When she was 3 steps away from him, she landed steadily and stood beside him. Xianxia ignored her angry gaze and swept his gaze across the entire place. His faint pressure made everyone unable to raise their heads. "He's a guard hired by my night palace. He has the same status as Xianxia and the other 3. There's no need to bow to me outside." "Huh?" Just like Beiting Han, everyone in the square was so shocked that their jaws dropped. Was that the reason? Was it? Was it? Regardless of whether it was true or not, it was true that His Highness the Night King was protecting the 9th young master. Beiting Huang was as surprised as everyone else. She looked up at the Night King. He was defending her. This was the second time he had helped her. She could not figure out the reason, but this protection was real. "Do you think I should kill you to appease those ignorant peasants?" A voice suddenly appeared in her mind. Beiting Huang was stunned for a moment before she realized that it was the legendary mental voice transmission. She stared blankly at Xianxia for a while and shook her head with a smile. She was thinking too much. As powerful as he was, why would he care about the thoughts of these commoners? Xianxia did not seem to notice that the people in the square were still kneeling. It seemed that if these people wanted to kneel, they could just keep kneeling. He sat steadily on the stage. Beiting Day, who was kneeling in front of him, could not remain calm. He secretly glanced at Xianxia from the corner of his eye, lowered his head, and said respectfully, "I didn't expect the 9th young master of the Beiting family to be able to catch His Highness's eye." He took a deep breath and raised his head to look at Beiting Huang. In a warning tone, he said, "Beiting Huang, since you are employed by the Night Manor, you must serve His Highness well." "Father, Beiting Huang isn't even a mercenary. She doesn't have the strength to become a mercenary." Beiting Han couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't that he was stupid, but when he saw that a piece of trash like Beiting Huang could win the favor of the most favored prince of the Raya Empire, His Highness the Night King, and even be valued as much as the 4 lords like Xianxia, Beiting Han was so jealous that he lost his mind. Why? She was a piece of trash. The Night King must not know her strength, so he judged wrongly. He can't even gather spiritual energy. Shut up! Beiting Day was so frightened that he broke out in a cold sweat. His son usually looked very alert, but why was he so muddle-headed at this time? Xianxia looked up at Beiting Huang with a faint smile. The handsome young man crossed his arms and looked expressionlessly at Beiting Han, who was kneeling on the ground. It was as if he was not kneeling for Xianxia, but him. "Ha ha ha, 9th young master. Is this your brother from the same family?" Xianxia could not hold it in anymore. He really liked this cool-looking young man. He was handsome and had a cold temperament. At such a young age, he was exceptionally calm. Beiting Huang shook her head. She gave Xianxia a meaningful look and said meaningfully, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. Before I accept the employment of the Night Manor, please allow me to register as a mercenary." "Do you really want to register as a mercenary? You have to know that the Night King Manor doesn't care if you're a mercenary or not when they hire you. the Xianxia advised. Beiting Huang shook her head and slowly swept her gaze across the people in the square. I, Beiting Huang, was born in the middle of heaven and earth. I rely on my own ability to make a living. I don't need anyone's protection. Her words were a rejection of the Night Manor's good intentions. Everyone was stunned. In the past, they had only heard that the 9th young master was a piece of trash. Why were their brains not working well now? I want to appraise my level. Xianxia understood what he meant and could not help but praise her from the bottom of his heart. He was a real man who relied on his ability to earn fame and fortune. If he accepted the employment of the Night King's mansion today, no matter what reputation he had in the future, everyone would always see him as a subordinate under the wings of the Night King's mansion. However, she had rejected the Night Manor in front of so many people. Just this step was already a step towards the path of the strong. Xianxia didn't say anything, but when he saw Beiting Huang leave, he didn't stop her. This made everyone even more surprised. Beiting Di and his son were also deeply disappointed. They had thought that since Beiting Huang did not know how to appreciate favors, the Night Manor would give him a small punishment no matter what. However, the Night King was not angry at all. Even so, no one dared to imitate Beiting Huang and use this trick to attract the attention of His Highness the Night King. After all, His Highness the Night King's reputation for being temperamental was well known in the Raya Empire. Who could compare to Beiting Huang's fearless spirit? On the central continent, there were 4 large organizations that transcended national boundaries and were closely related to almost everyone. The Mercenary Association, the Pharmacist Association, the Swordsman Association, and the Spirit Master Association. These were also 4 powerful organizations that organized the different professions in the entire continent to maintain, restrain, and establish order. Although Luobei City was not a big town, it was located at the edge of the Sunset Forest. The Sunset Forest was frequented by magical beasts and nurtured a large number of heavenly materials and earthly treasures. Every year, a large number of adventurers would visit. As time passed, this place slowly became prosperous. The 4 major guilds were located at the north entrance of the town. In order to make it easier for warriors to enter and exit the Sunset Forest, the 4 major guilds stood next to each other. As soon as Beiting Huang left, many busybodies followed her. They wanted to see how the most famous trash in Luobeng City would become a mercenary. One had to know that if one wanted to become a mercenary, they had to at least become a Class 1 professional and become a swordsman or a spiritualist. Beiting Huang didn't know. Fortunately, Beiting Yao reminded her, "Little Ninth, why don't we go back first? Since you don't want to be employed by the Night Manor, there's no need for us to become mercenaries." Standing on the lintel in front of the Mercenary Association, Beiting Huang took a glance at the door. At the door, there were 2 men who were waiting to receive her. They were very arrogant. When they saw Beiting Huang, they only glanced at her indifferently, as if she was an ant. Level 1 Professionist? Beiting Huang pondered for a moment. Beiting Yao was still trying to persuade her, but she lifted her foot and walked toward the Swordmasters Guild, which was across the street from the Mercenary Association. Beiting Yao had no choice but to follow behind her. "Miss, I would like to appraise my level." Beiting Huang stood in front of the counter and tapped her fingers on the counter as she spoke to the girl who was receiving her at the Swordmasters Guild. "What did you say?" The girl was flirting with a swordsman next to her. When she heard what Beiting Huang said, she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. "You're appraising your level? What level? The useless 9th young master is here to appraise your level?" Beiting Huang's face suddenly darkened, and a cold light appeared in her eyes. "Is this how the Swordmasters Guild receives guests? You're just a piece of trash. What right do you have to be our honored guest?" The girl's disdainful look made Beiting Huang angry. She was a 3rd-generation member of the Beiting family, but she had been bullied in a small place like Luobei City. The swordsman beside her also mocked, "Ha ha ha, what a joke! Trash ninth young master wants to appraise his swordsman's level. Did you hear that? Ha ha ha! Not only the strength of a 7-star swordsman. Bang! A sudden punch flashed past his eyes like a bolt of lightning. He felt a sharp pain in his face, and a fishy smell surged from his mouth. The swordsman hurriedly covered his mouth with one hand and drew his sword with the other. As soon as his hand touched the hilt of the sword, he felt a sharp pain in his wrist. A steel-like force restrained his wrist. The swordsman instinctively struggled, and the feeling of his bones distorting and shattering came. He did not dare to move. Trash! Beiting Huang returned the 2 words to him. The 4 Guilds Hall had always been crowded with people. Many people gathered early in the morning and late at night. At this moment, everyone in the hall stopped. Beiting Huang's attack was as fast as lightning. Those who were at a lower level did not even have time to see how Beiting Huang attacked. The swordsman who had a conflict with her was thrown to the ground by her. Then she stepped on the man's abdomen. Her foot slipped and landed on his waist. She kicked him hard, and he was already flying. Thud! The sound of something heavy falling to the ground sounded at the door, raising a ring of dust. Beautiful. All his movements were coherent, smooth, and smooth. The entire hall was filled with exclamations. At this moment, no one cared about the swordsman who had been kicked out as cannon fodder. Everyone's eyes were on the handsome youth in the black robe. She clapped her hands and turned around calmly. She asked the receptionist behind the counter, who was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. Miss, what level is that swordsman just now? Huh? Oh? The receptionist came back to her senses and stole a glance at Beiting Huang. Her heart raced and her face turned red. She didn't expect the 9th young master, who wasn't a good-for-nothing, to be so handsome. She didn't dare to treat the 9th young master poorly anymore. She checked the data and said, "Yes, he's a 7-star swordsman." Very good. Then I should be qualified to be a 7-star swordsman, right? Beiting Huang said indifferently. Sword masters and spirit masters all had special badges, on which had some patterns and symbols were used to indicate their level. The real test of the level of a sword master was to place a small ball of standard weight in a long, fragile bottle. When a sword master used a sword to hit the small ball, they had to grasp the speed and strength well so that the small ball would not break the long bottle. The long bottle would be labeled with levels. The level of the small ball would correspond to the level of the sword master. Of course, this method was only used for the grade assessment of Earth Stage sword masters. Once one reached the Heaven Stage, there would be another set of assessment criteria, but it was rarely used. Firstly, there were very few Heaven Stage sword masters. Secondly, Heaven Stage sword masters were popular in the entire continent and did not care about the grade of their badges. This your 9th young master, I'm afraid, The receptionist didn't dare to break the rules of the assessment, nor did she dare to reject him directly. Just as she was in a dilemma, someone answered on her behalf. Please register this sword master as a 7-star swordsman and give her a badge. An old man with white hair and beard slowly walked down the stairs. He held the stairs with his hand and looked down at Beiting Huang. However, the kindness in his eyes did not make Beiting Huang uncomfortable. Beiting Huang nodded gratefully at him, and the old man came down with a smile. I just saw that you're very skilled. You're not just a 7-star swordsman. Beiting Huang didn't know this old man, but it didn't mean that the others didn't know him. Ah, it's Sir Kangmu. Sir Kangmu is a star sword master. Sir Kangmu said that the 9th young master is more than a 7-star swordsman. What does that mean? It means that the 9th young master is not a piece of trash. Lobe City was a small place. There were many level 1 professionals here. Even a level 2 professional was a powerhouse, let alone a heaven-class professional like the Star Sword Master. He was like a god here. Heaven-rank swordsman, Kangmu Star Sword. Master Kangmu? Beiting Huang vaguely remembered this person. He was one of the Empire's guardian warriors. Although he was not in charge of the Sword Master branch here, as a Star Sword Master with the strength of a heaven rank, he had some weight here. She could feel this person's goodwill. This person had deliberately said this to clear her name. Although she knew very well that a person was useless until he could prove it with his own strength, she would not ignore or reject others' kindness. However, Beiting Huang had always been a cold person and did not know how to say many nice things. She only nodded at Kang Mu. She looked extremely cool like this. Kang Mu did not think that she was rude. Instead, he admired her arrogance. She was not easily moved by others' good intentions because she had the strength and determination to become stronger. Determination was especially important. Kang Mu and her nodded slightly. When he walked past her, he even raised his hand and stroked her hair kindly. This action shocked everyone even more. Their eyeballs were about to fall out. He was a star sword master, a high and mighty person. Why was he so good to the 9th young master? If the 9th young master was a good-for-nothing, would the star sword master treat her so well? When the receptionist came out with a swordsman's badge, she happened to see this scene. When she walked to Beiting Huang's side, she lowered her waist even more, and her voice became gentler. She was very ashamed of her previous neglect. 9th young master, this is your swordsman's badge. Do you need me to help you put it on? No need. Beiting Huang took the badge and put it on her chest. She was not a petty person. She had just vented her anger, and the receptionist had changed her attitude. She did not need to take such a small fry seriously. When Beiting Huang left the Swordmasters Guild, she returned to the Mercenary Guild across the street with Beiting Yao. The moment she saw Beiting Huang, the receptionist behind the counter was stunned for a moment. Just as she was about to ask Beiting Huang to leave, she saw the Swordmaster badge on Beiting Huang's chest. She quickly put on a smile, stood up and asked gently, "So it's 9th young master, how can I help you?" Noticing the attitude of the receptionist, Beiting Yao cursed under his breath. Snobbish. However, Beiting Huang did not care. She did not want to argue with these small fries. Therefore, as soon as the receptionist looked at her as if she was looking at trash, she quickly showed her badge. Everyone in the world praised the strong and stepped on the bottom. This was human nature. How could they be calculative? One day she would make everyone look up at her. She would become strong one day. I want to register and become a mercenary. Beiting Huang gently knocked on the table. She was handsome to begin with, and her black glass-like eyes were sparkling, making people feel intoxicated. The receptionist couldn't help but stare at her. She had never thought that the 9th young master would look so cool when he raised his head and puffed out his chest. It turned out that the 9th young master was not trash. The 9th young master who was not trash was really handsome. Ha 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 ha, mercenary. Are you kidding me? Who are you? Aren't you the useless 9th young master? How funny. Do you know what mercenaries do? At the door, a young man wearing shorts walked in. He had a pair of eyebrows and eyes. As soon as he entered, he saw the receptionist, who had always been especially flirtatious with him, looking straight at Beiting Huang. He was instantly furious. He was also a mercenary. He spent most of his time in the Sunset Forest near Luo Bay City. Of course, he knew Beiting Huang. Challenging a 2-star sword master. Trash? Who are you calling trash? Beiting Yao had had enough today. Only now did he know what kind of life his younger brother had been living all these years. No matter how much her family bullied her, even outsiders looked down on her. Of course I'm talking about the 9th young master. If he's not trash, why is he hiding behind others? The young man carried a heavy sword on his back. As he was very strong, he had some prestige among the mercenaries in Luo Bay City. Beiting Huang pulled Beiting Yao behind her and squinted at the sword behind the young man. What level are you? Huang Bin, the 9th young master is a 7-star swordsman. The receptionist had flirted with this young man called Huang Bin for a long time. She must have had some feelings for him and kindly reminded him. 7-star swordsman? Huang Bin was a little surprised, but when he saw the girl, he liked looking at Beiting Huang with stars in her eyes. He couldn't help but feel even angrier. This kid was good-looking and just a pretty boy. He drew his sword with a whoosh and pointed the tip of the sword at Beiting Huang. "You're just a 7-star swordsman. As a 2-star swordmaster, I'll let you use one move." One move? This was simply humiliating her. Beiting Huang could tell that Huang Bin was like a male dog in heat. He probably wanted to sleep with the receptionist and wanted to use her to make his presence known. In that case, let her fulfill his wish. Swordmasters were also divided into 2 grades. Swordmasters, and Master Swordmasters were all base grades. Each grade was divided into 9 stars. Huang Bin was a 2-star swordmaster, which meant that he was a 2nd-grade professional. She wanted to see how powerful the 2nd-grade professionals on this mainland were. "I don't have a sword, and I don't need you to give way to me. Let's begin." Beiting Huang lifted her black robe and tied it around her waist, revealing her warrior uniform. Her awe-inspiring aura made everyone's eyes fall on her. 9th Young Master. 9th Young Master was only a 7-star swordsman, but he had the courage to challenge a 2-star swordmaster. She was a grade away from him, and a grade was a powerful dividing line. She could not reject such an unfair challenge. Courageous people had always been respected by hot-blooded people. Mercenaries lived and died by the sword. They were the most bold and unrestrained. When they saw that Beiting Huang was not sloppy, cold, and arrogant, her image was imprinted in everyone's hearts even before the fight began. Even if she lost, it was not shameful. On the contrary, if Beiting Huang did not have the guts to accept the challenge, she would be looked down upon. Soon a large space was cleared in the hall. Beiting Yao was very worried. She wanted to help Beiting Huang, but it was obvious that it was impossible. Beiting Huang stood sideways and stared at Huang Bin with her cold, starry eyes. She was only a 7-star swordsman, but Huang Bin, a 2-star swordmaster, felt a chill in his bones. Huang Bin held the hilt of his heavy sword and let out a low roar as he slashed at Beiting Huang. There were no fancy moves, only the most straightforward sword moves. However, with a thunderous pressure, this kind of move was the most effective. Beiting Huang's strength was 1 level lower than his. He could use his sword aura to intimidate and injure the enemy with one move. He could also establish his prestige in front of everyone, especially the receptionist. Fearless hero. A true warrior? Young Master Qin Yu said that the 9th Young Master was a true warrior? What kind of person was Young Master Qin Yu? He was an expert among the 3rd rank professions and a level 7 Great Spirit Master. He respected the 9th Young Master so much that he personally invited the 9th Young Master to join the Snow Wolf Mercenary Group. One had to know that all mercenaries wanted to join the Snow Wolf Mercenary Group. But was the #1 mercenary group on the continent so easy to enter? Immediately everyone in the hall went crazy. They rushed towards Beiting Huang. Some of them joked, "9th Young Master, why don't you take pity on us and join us?" "Haha, that's right. Young Master Qin Yu, there are so many experts in your mercenary group. Don't snatch the 9th Young Master from us." "9th Young Master, we are the Blackwater Mercenary Group, the 3rd largest mercenary group on the continent. Why don't you consider us?" Due to the Night King's mansion's mission of finding an egg, almost all the top mercenary groups on the continent had rushed over. At this moment, Spark stood at the back of the crowd. He was the leader of the 2nd largest mercenary group on the continent. After hesitating for a moment, he also squeezed over and said a few polite words with a smile. "9th Young Master, please allow me, Spark, to express my respect to you. The door of our Execution Wind mercenary group is always open to brave warriors like you." Mercenaries were very brave and emotional. They praised warriors, respected the strong, and valued loyalty. If he did not express it at the right time, he would probably be rejected by the mercenaries. This was a good time to publicize his mercenary group. Beiting Huang was a mercenary in her previous life, so she was very familiar with the mercenary world. She felt like she had returned to her previous life. These hot-blooded men were so direct. They liked the strong and despised the weak. For their dignity, They would choose respect even if they died. On the contrary, if they were submissive, they would be looked down upon. Fearless. She had defeated a swordmaster who held a heavy sword with her bare hands. She was qualified to be respected by everyone. I'm sorry. I've already promised the Night Manor that I'll be employed by them. Beiting Huang looked at the man who had sincerely invited her. If young Master Qin Yu doesn't mind, we can fight side by side after I complete this mission. She did not agree to join the Snow Wolf mercenary group. It was obvious that she was not a person who was willing to be restrained. Qin Yu was not angry. On the contrary, he admired her personality. All right, since we are all employed by the Night King's mansion, we have a chance to fight side by side. Let's go. It's getting late. Let's go to the Night King's place together. Qin Yu invited Beiting Huang to go with him. Behind them was a large group of mercenaries. It's a pity that I didn't manage to invite you to join our mercenary group. Qin Yu chatted with Beiting Huang for a while. For some reason, the more they interacted, the more he liked this little brother. He simply said, "Don't call me young Master Qin Yu. I won't call you ninth young master. I'm 10 years older than you. You can call me Big Brother." Big Brother. Looking at Qin Yu's kind eyes and gentle smile, Beiting Huang couldn't help but think of her big brother who had been gone for a few years. For a moment she was touched. She murmured, "Big Brother." It was obvious that Beiting Huang was looking at someone else through him. Not only did Qin Yu not feel disgusted, but he also saw the pain in Beiting Huang's eyes. When he thought of his status as the good-for-nothing ninth young master, his heart ached. He put his arm around Beiting Huang's shoulder and said, "Little ninth, from now on, I am your big brother. With me around, I will definitely protect you." Within 3 feet, the two of them became acquainted. When they reached the edge of the Sunset Forest, Beiting Huang finally realized how huge the mission issued by the Night Manor was. In the distance, the lush forest stretched as far as the eye could see. Tents had been set up in the middle of Luobei City, divided into different areas. Flags announced that different areas belonged to different forces. The Night King's tent was in the middle. There was a large empty space at the side. Someone was busy setting up the tent. 3 flags had already been erected in the middle. They belonged to the Snow Wolf mercenary group, the Blackwater mercenary group, and the Xingfeng mercenary group. They were the 3 top mercenary groups on the continent. There were also the royal warriors of the Raya Empire, some noble families of the empire, the Dragon City clan, the Su clan, and other aristocratic families, such as the Mu clan. The Beiting family had also sent people here, but because Luobei City was a subsidiary town of Beiting, they had sent people to assist the Night King. Xianxia stood in front of the central tent and looked at the shadow of the full moon in the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. When he heard a commotion, he looked over and saw Beiting Huang and Qin Yu walking side by side. He couldn't help but frown and reach out his hand to Beiting Huang. "Come here." He had only met him 3 times, but he had already done this twice. He had only met him 3 times, but he had already helped him twice. Beiting Huang could not refuse him. She nodded slightly to Qin Yu and walked towards Xianxia. Of course, she would not shake his hand. She glanced at his hand, which looked like it was carved from white jade. She felt that this man was naturally noble, elegant, and perfect. "Your Highness!" Xianxia glanced at her and turned to enter the tent, followed by Beiting Huang. The tent was huge. There were tables, chairs, and even a screen and bed. Xianxia sat down on the main seat and pointed to the chair closest to him for Beiting Huang to sit down. Beiting Huang could not help but think of Mu Wanyue, who had been thrown aside by the Xianxia in the central square of Luobei City a few hours ago. Xianxia had said she was not allowed to get within 3 feet of the Night King. The chair she was going to sit on was less than 3 feet away from the Night King. The Night King picked up a cup of tea and blew on it gently. He was only in his early 20s and was born beautiful and flirtatious. No matter what he did, He was smooth and natural. His appearance was especially pleasing to the eye, and it was as if he could see through her thoughts. "Sit. I'll allow you to approach within 3 feet of me." Beiting Huang stood still and looked at him quietly. He was an exceptionally cold person. His eyebrows were sharp, and his eyes were as cold as snow on a snowy mountain. His purple eyes were beautiful and charming. Beiting Huang heard him gently place the teacup on the table. "You're very similar to her. Your appearance and personality are very similar. You're both very stubborn and strong-willed. You're proud. Even if you don't have strength, you're still very arrogant. You're both so cute." The last word was clearly cute, but when it came out of the mouth of a heartless and cold person like Xianxia, Beiting Huang felt a certain pain. She suddenly raised her head to look at him, and a trace of pain flashed across his eyes. It was so obvious and surprising. The high and mighty Night King was just a mortal. He would be injured, hurt, and sad. After saying this, Xianxia was a little worried. No one was willing to be a person's incarnation and substitute. He thought that Beiting Huang would be angry, but she took 3 steps forward firmly and stood in front of him.